Hello, Kivemi here with another Reddit story. Today's is about a wife who discovers her husband is planning a secret getaway with his lover. But she and the lover's fiancé orchestrate a masterful plan to expose them on the high seas. It's a story of betrayal, revenge, and unexpected alliances that really keeps you listening. Settle in, enjoy the Minecraft in the background, and let's get into it. The alert appeared on my screen at 3:17 p.m. on a Tuesday, an email confirmation forwarded from Ocean Dream Cruise Lines, not sent to me, but accidentally shared to our family cloud storage. A luxury suite, a bottle of fine wine, a couple's massage, all booked under my husband's name for the following week during his supposed important business summit in Dallas. Except there was another name on the reservation: Felicity. My hands didn't shake, my juice didn't spill. Something cold and solid formed inside me. 15 years of marriage suddenly viewed with terrible, sharp clarity. I scrolled through the travel plan with strange calm: a 4-day Caribbean voyage, an ocean view balcony cabin, dinner at the captain's table. All the romantic cliches you'd expect from a man who couldn't even recall my birthday. Working late again tonight, he had texted me an hour earlier. Don't wait up. I studied the cruise details, noting the exact cabin number, deck 10, room 1243, starboard side. Seeing those specific details made the lie real. This wasn't just flirting. This was careful planning, a hidden life being constructed while I maintained ours. What a fool I had been. I remember standing up and walking to our bedroom closet, the one we shared. His suits hung next to my dresses as if they belonged there, his shoes lined up with mine. The physical closeness of our things suddenly felt insulting. I was about to start ripping down his clothes to shred the fabric and destroy the memories when my phone chimed again. Another alert from the family cloud. A photo appeared. A woman, young with blonde hair, perfect teeth, posing in front of a mirror, wearing expensive lingerie that still had price tags dangling from it. The message read, "Can't wait for you to take this off on our trip. Counting the days." I recognised her. Felicity, the new client services manager at my husband's company, the one he had insisted on inviting to our holiday party last December, the one who had looked at me with something like pity while accepting a glass of wine in my own house. What stopped me from destroying his things wasn't control. It was a sudden memory, a conversation I'd overheard at a charity event 3 months ago. Felicity loudly discussing her engagement to some tech CEO, showing off a large diamond ring, talking about her upcoming June wedding. I sat on the edge of our bed, phone still in hand, and did something I'd never done before. I searched her name on a social media platform. Her profile was public, filled with posts about being blessed and future wife. And there he was, her fiancé, tagged in dozens of photos. David, handsome in his polished, high-tech way. His own profile was full of success stories and inspirational quotes. One recent post caught my attention. Heading on a solo trip before the wedding madness. Time to clear my head and come back ready to start forever with F. The cruise dates matched exactly. A strange calmness washed over me. The kind that arrives when the universe delivers something so perfectly timed, it feels like fate. I opened my laptop and went to the Ocean Dream Cruise Line's deck plans. Cabin availability. My credit card was already in my hand. 20 minutes later, I had my own confirmation email. Single cabin 1245, right next to their love nest. The neatness was too perfect to ignore. I took a deep breath and did the only rational thing a woman in my position could do. I found David's business email through his company website and sent him a message. "Mr. David, I believe we have something important to discuss regarding our respective partners and their upcoming Caribbean voyage. Would you be available for coffee tomorrow? It concerns your fiancée, Felicity, and my husband, who have made plans I think you should know about." I attached the booking confirmation. I didn't cry, I didn't yell. I simply waited, watching the tiny dots that showed he was reading my message. Typing. Stopping. Typing again. His response came 3 minutes later. Where and when? The next morning I sat at a corner table in an upscale city cafe, watching the entrance. I recognised him immediately, taller in person, with that confident walk of someone used to leading. His eyes found mine across the space. Recognition, understanding, the look of someone whose world was also shattering. He sat across from me. No handshake, no introduction needed. "Show me everything," he said quietly, and I did. By the time our coffees had gotten cold, we had formed a partnership born of shared betrayal. Not just a partnership, a plan, a strategy, I said, finally allowing myself a bitter smile. They think they're so clever. They have no idea what's coming. David's expression became hard with resolve. "What exactly did you have in mind?" I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "I already booked the cabin next to theirs, but one person watching their romantic getaway crumble isn't as satisfying as two, don't you think?" He leaned in too, his voice just as low. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we both take that cruise. I'm suggesting we become very, very good friends who just happen to be everywhere they are. I'm suggesting we make this the vacation they'll never forget, for all the wrong reasons." For the first time since we'd sat down, David smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone imagining sweet, calculated revenge. "I'm in," he said, "but we need to be smarter than them. We need a plan that doesn't just expose them, but destroys whatever fantasy they've built." I nodded, feeling something like excitement beneath my anger. By the time we dock back in the port, they'll wish they never set foot on that ship. The week before the cruise passed in a perfect performance. I kissed my husband goodbye as he packed his conference clothes. I helped him choose a tie for his presentation. I even drove him to the airport, waving from the drop-off lane with a smile plastered on my face. "I'll miss you," he said, his eyes not quite meeting mine. "Oh, I'm sure the time will fly," I replied, thinking of the swimsuits and evening dresses already packed in my own suitcase, hidden in David's temporary apartment. As soon as his plane took off, not to Dallas, but to the departure city, I drove straight to the port where David was waiting. We had spent every day of the past week planning, coordinating, building a backstory that would make us seem like old college friends, reuniting by chance, practicing our reactions for when we accidentally ran into our cheating partners. Memorizing the ship's layout, we booked identical shore trips to the ones they had scheduled. "How are you feeling?" David asked as we checked in at the cruise terminal, his hand briefly touching my shoulder. "I keep alternating between wanting to cry and wanting to push them both overboard," I admitted. He nodded. "I've already looked up maritime law. Unfortunately, that would be frowned upon." That unexpected flash of dark humour made me laugh for the first time in days. It felt strange in my throat. We boarded separately, agreeing to meet later after settling into our cabins. I found mine easily, 1245, right next to where my husband would soon be caressing his lover. I pressed my ear to the shared wall. Empty for now. Their flight wouldn't arrive for a few hours. I unpacked methodically, hanging dresses I had bought specifically for this cruise. Dresses my husband had never seen. Dresses chosen to make a statement when the inevitable confrontation came. At 6 p.m, David texted, "They've boarded. Just saw them at check-in. They didn't see me." My heart raced. My palms grew damp. The moment was coming faster than I had expected. I met David at a bar 3 decks up, far enough away that we wouldn't immediately run into them. He already had a martini waiting for me. "To the most twisted vacation either of us has ever taken," he said, raising his glass. I clinked mine against his. "May we survive with our dignity, if not our marriages." My marriage ended before it began, apparently. His voice had the same hollow quality I'd felt in my chest for days. We shared our stories then, filling in the blanks of our relationships. David had met Felicity at a technology event 2 years ago. They had gotten engaged quickly, too quickly. He realised now there had been signs of her being unfaithful. Unexplained absences, secret phone behaviour, sudden work emergencies. "I ignored it all," he said, staring at his drink. "I wanted so badly to, believe I'd found the right person." 15 years, I replied. 15 years I gave him. We talked about children. We had agreed together to focus on our careers first. We had a timeline. Next year was supposed to be our year to try. My voice broke unexpectedly. David's expression softened. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." "I am angry." We spent hours talking, drinking enough to stay relaxed but not enough to cloud our judgment. We needed to be sharp, ready. Around 10 p.m, we ventured to the main dining room for the welcome dinner, and there they were, sitting at a table for two near the windows. My husband's hand rested on the small of Felicity's back as they studied the menu. Intimate, comfortable, practiced. The sight hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't their first trip together. This wasn't new. The realization made my knees buckle slightly. David steadied me with a hand on my elbow. "Not yet," he whispered. "Let them think they got away with it. Tomorrow we begin." We retreated to a different restaurant, but I couldn't eat. My stomach was a knot of acid and anger. "How long do you think this has been going on?" I asked, pushing pasta around my plate. "Does it matter? A day? A month? A year? They both betrayed us." "It matters to me," I insisted. "I need to know how much of my life has been a lie." Back in my cabin that night, I pressed my ear to the wall again. I could hear them laughing, murmuring, the occasional creak of bed springs. I recorded it all, evidence for what was to come. I barely slept. When morning came, I met David for breakfast on the top deck. We had determined that our cheating partners had booked a scuba diving trip at our first stop, a small private island owned by the cruise line. "Ready for day one?" David asked, sliding a coffee toward me. "As ready as I'll ever be." We took the smaller boat to the island 30 minutes after my husband and Felicity had left. We spotted them easily on the beach, sharing a lounge chair, her head on his chest, his fingers running through her hair. David and I set up our own chairs exactly in their line of sight, but angled so they wouldn't notice us immediately. We waited for the perfect moment, the recognition, the shock. It came when my husband stood up to get drinks from the beach bar. He turned, 2 frozen cocktails in hand, and froze mid-step when he saw me. The drinks tilted, blue liquid splashing over his hands. I gave a little wave, as casual as if we were running into each other at a grocery store. His face went pale so quickly I thought he might faint. He stood paralysed, unable to move toward me or back to Felicity, who was still scrolling through her phone obliviously. I adjusted my new swimsuit, a daring red piece I never would have chosen before, and walked directly toward him. "What a coincidence," I said, loud enough for nearby sunbathers to hear. "How lucky to run into you here. The weather looks different than I remembered from Dallas." He opened and closed his mouth, speechless. Over his shoulder I saw Felicity look up, confusion crossing her face, then horror as she spotted David approaching behind me. "What? How?" my husband finally managed. "Your lover should be more careful about sharing your itinerary on the family cloud account," I said pleasantly. "Oh, and you should meet my friend David. I think he already knows your girlfriend." I turned to Felicity, whose face had turned the colour of sour milk. "That engagement ring looks beautiful in the sunlight. Does your fiancé know you're engaged? Or is that just a detail you've overlooked while planning your romantic getaway?" People were watching us now, openly staring at the drama unfolding on the perfect white sand. "This isn't what it looks like," my husband finally said, the most cliched phrase possible. "Really?" I looked pointedly at the 2 blue drinks, then Felicity's shocked face, then back at him. "Because it looks exactly like you're on a cruise with your lover while telling your wife you're at a business conference in Dallas." David stepped forward, addressing Felicity directly. "We've booked all the same shore trips as you. Isn't that a wonderful coincidence? We'll have lots of quality time together on this trip." And that was just the beginning. The first day of 4. The foundation of what would become the most unbearable vacation for 2 people who thought they had gotten away with betrayal. I knew then that I had given this man everything. My youth, my trust, my unconditional support through career changes and family losses. I had been there through it all, believing we were building something meaningful together, and all the while he had been building a separate life, a life that didn't include me. I gave them one last smile. "Enjoy your drinks, the cruise is just beginning." That night David and I regrouped in my cabin, analysing the day's confrontation and fine-tuning our strategy for the days ahead. The initial shock had provided satisfaction, but it wasn't enough. Nowhere near enough for the depth of their betrayal. "They're rattled," David observed, pacing the small confines of my room. I saw Felicity try to change their dinner reservations and shore trips. I nodded, scrolling through the ship's app on my tablet. "They won't get far. I've befriended 3 crew members who keep me updated on any changes they try to make." This was no longer a spontaneous reaction. During that week of planning, I had been methodical in ways I never knew I could be. What my husband didn't know, I had photographed all his office documents before leaving home. I had downloaded his text message history through our phone plan's backup service. I had contacted our bank and flagged large expenses from the past year, creating a perfect timeline of his affair through hotel charges and gift purchases. What Felicity didn't know, David had been equally thorough, gathering screenshots of suspicious messages, tracking her location history, and, most damaging of all, documenting how she had been diverting funds from their startup's investors to finance luxury purchases. "Tomorrow is the formal dinner," I said, studying the schedule. "They'll expect us to make a scene." David stopped pacing. "So we don't. We do the opposite." "Exactly." I smiled, feeling a cold clarity. "We'll be charming, friendly even. We'll invite them to join our table. We'll talk casually about psychological warfare." David nodded appreciatively. The anticipation of confrontation is often worse than the confrontation itself. I stood and walked to my suitcase, pulling out a sealed envelope. I've been saving this for the right moment. Now I think I know when to use it. Inside were photos, security camera images from the ship showing my husband and Felicity on previous cruises, dates, timestamps, proof of a pattern going back 18 months. The head of security had been surprisingly helpful after I explained my situation and offered a generous consulting fee. "How did you get these?" David asked, impressed. "Let's just say when your husband brags about always booking the same cruise line for business trips, it creates a traceable pattern." I laid the photos chronologically. 8 cruises in 18 months. Always with her. Always during what he claimed were conferences or client meetings. David whistled softly. "That's not a romance. That's a second relationship." "Exactly. And tomorrow night, I want them both to understand that we know everything, not just this cruise. Everything." We stayed up past midnight planning every interaction, every casual encounter for the remaining days. We were no longer improvising. This was choreographed retribution. The next morning brought another shore trip, a tour of ancient ruins at our first stop. As planned, David and I arrived just as my husband and Felicity were boarding the tour bus. The colour drained from their faces when they saw us. I smiled brightly and took the seat directly behind them. "Good morning. Sleep well?" Felicity stared straight ahead, rigid with tension. My husband attempted a weak smile. Look, we can talk privately." "Oh, we'll have plenty of time to talk," I assured him. "We have 2 more days together on this lovely ship. No rush." During the tour, David and I maintained pleasant conversation, occasionally directing innocent questions to our uncomfortable companions. "Have you visited these ruins before? Isn't the architecture fascinating?" Each normal interaction seemed to make them more nervous than a direct confrontation would have. When we returned to the ship, they were visibly unravelling, exchanging tense whispers, looking over their shoulders, jumping at every corner where they spotted us. For that night's formal dinner, I wore a black dress I had bought specifically for this cruise. Elegant, understated, with just enough edge to make a statement. David wore a tailored suit that highlighted all the advantages of his athletic build. We entered the dining room deliberately 15 minutes after my husband and Felicity had been seated. "May we join you?" I asked, already pulling out a chair at their table for 2. The host mentioned you had room. He couldn't refuse without creating a scene. Trapped by social convention, they shifted uncomfortably as we settled in. "Wonderful evening, isn't it?" David began, unfolding his napkin with practiced ease. "Felicity, that dress looks familiar. Didn't you wear it to the Henderson Charity Gala last month?" Her eyes widened slightly. The Henderson Gala had been a work event, one where she had introduced my husband as her colleague. "Yes, I think so," she stammered. I flagged down a waiter. "Champagne for the table, please. We're celebrating." My husband's expression darkened. "What exactly are we celebrating?" I smiled, reaching into my purse to pull out the envelope of photos. "Anniversaries, specifically the 18-month anniversary of your first cruise together." I placed the photos on the table, one by one, like dealing cards. Caribbean, March last year. Mediterranean, May. Alaska, July. Each one during what you told me were business trips. The blood drained from his face. "How did you—" I've always admired your consistency, I continued, my voice steady despite my hammering heart. Same cruise line, often the same cabin category. Made tracking surprisingly easy. Felicity's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. David chose that moment to make his contribution. Speaking of consistency, he said, sliding a folder across the table toward Felicity. I've been reviewing our company's finances. Interesting pattern of withdrawals that coincides with the dates of these cruises. Her glass froze halfway to her lips. That's not... You can't prove... Our investors were quite interested in the documentation, David continued calmly. I had a fascinating call with them yesterday. This was the moment I prepared for, watching the dawn of understanding that we weren't just angry spouses lashing out. We had been methodical, patient. We had receipts, literally and figuratively. What do you want? My husband finally asked, his voice barely audible above the dining room's ambient noise. I leaned forward, maintaining eye contact. For tonight, just dinner, pleasant conversation. Maybe you could tell David about your conference schedule for the next few months. I'm sure he'd be interested to know which business trips are actually romantic getaways. They sat frozen, trapped by their own web of lies. As the waiter arrived with champagne, I raised my glass to truth. It always surfaces eventually. During dinner, we maintained cordial conversation, periodically dropping details that confirmed how thoroughly we had investigated their affair. Each revelation felt like a precise incision, small cuts that accumulated into significant damage. By dessert, they both looked physically ill. When we finally stood to leave, I left a room key card on the table. For your convenience, I explained. It's for the cabin adjacent to yours. We've been taking turns listening through the wall. The soundproofing is surprisingly poor. My husband's face contorted with the understanding that even their most intimate moments had been compromised. As David and I walked away, he whispered, "That was masterful, but that's just the beginning, isn't it?" I nodded, feeling not joy but cold satisfaction. Tomorrow we move to phase 2. Tonight was about showing them we know everything. Tomorrow is about showing them what that knowledge will cost them. Back in my cabin, I finally allowed myself a moment of genuine grief. Not for my husband, but for the life I had believed in. 15 years lost, trust shattered, future plans evaporated. But in its place was something unexpected, a sense of my own power. I had been blindsided by betrayal, but I'd responded not with helpless heartbreak, but with calculated action. I sent one final text to David before sleep. "Thank you for today. Tomorrow we show no mercy." His response came immediately. "They created this situation. We're just ensuring they experience the consequences they deserve." I fell asleep to the sound of a muffled argument through the wall, a lullaby of justice beginning to unfold. The third day of the cruise dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for what David and I had planned. While my husband and Felicity had spent the night arguing, we had been finalising details with various crew members and other passengers we had recruited to our cause. Our first encounter was at breakfast. We saw them at a corner table hunched over coffee, looking exhausted and tense. Instead of approaching, we sat prominently in the centre of the dining room, laughing and chatting with a group of passengers we had befriended, specifically 2 couples who turned out to be from my husband's industry. "Rachel and Diana are from Westbrook Partners," I exclaimed as we passed their table later, gesturing to our new friends. "Apparently they've been trying to reach your company about that merger proposal. What a coincidence finding them here." My husband's coffee cup clattered against its saucer. Westbrook Partners was indeed a major potential client his company had been courting for months. Now they were learning about his business conference, while he sat next to his lover. "We're having drinks with them later," David added cheerfully. "You should join us. I'm sure they'd love to hear about your professional commitments." They didn't respond, but the message was clear. Their private affair was becoming increasingly public, with imminent professional consequences. By noon, we had implemented the next phase. During their scheduled couples massage at the ship's spa, they arrived to discover their appointment had been accidentally changed to separate treatments in different rooms. Meanwhile, David and I enjoyed their original time slot, having befriended the spa manager with a generous tip and a convincing story about anniversary celebrations. Small disruptions continued throughout the day. Their lunch reservation mysteriously cancelled, their shore trip overbooked, their special requests lost in the system. Nothing dramatic enough to blame on sabotage, just a steady stream of inconveniences that were undermining their romantic getaway. But the real turning point came that evening. The ship's program included a passenger talent show followed by a dance contest. David and I had signed up, and we had also entered my husband and Felicity's names without their knowledge. "Our next contestants," announced the cruise director to the packed lounge. "Join us celebrating a special occasion. Let's welcome Robert and Felicity." A spotlight swung to their table, where they sat frozen in horror as their names were called. The crowd applauded enthusiastically. "We've heard they're celebrating a special relationship anniversary," the director continued, reading from the card I'd submitted. 18 months of relationship bliss. Although I'm also hearing congratulations are in order for Felicity's engagement. Wait, that can't be right. Confused murmurs spread through the audience as my husband and Felicity remained glued to their seats, mortification evident on their faces. "Maybe they're feeling shy," David called out from our table. "Maybe they'd feel more comfortable if we showed everyone photos of their celebration first." Before they could react, the large screen behind the stage lit up with images. The security camera photos from their previous cruises, interspersed with screenshots of text messages between them planning their meetups. I had carefully edited out anything explicitly incriminating, leaving enough context for the audience to piece together the situation. We didn't authorise," my husband stammered, finally finding his voice as he stood. "Oh, one more special photo," I announced, nodding to the AV technician I had befriended. The screen changed to show Felicity's engagement announcement post, complete with her radiant smile next to David, a massive ring prominently displayed. The date stamp was unmistakable, 6 months into her affair with my husband. The room fell silent as understanding gripped the audience. Then came the whispers, the sideways glances, the judgment. They had avoided this by conducting their affair on anonymous cruises where no one knew them. "I think that's our cue," David said, standing and offering me his hand. "We should show them how it's done." We took to the dance floor for the competition, performing a tango we had practiced during our planning week. Every dramatic turn and dip was executed with precision, our eyes meeting in a performance of connection that drew enthusiastic applause. When we finished, I saw my husband and Felicity slip out of the lounge, heads down, unable to face the room full of strangers who now knew their secret. We followed at a distance, watching them argue in a secluded corner of the deck. Their body language told the story: accusations, denials, recriminations. "They are imploding," David observed quietly. "Good," I replied, feeling a satisfaction deeper than I'd expected. But we're not finished yet. That night we implemented the final stage of our ship-based plan. While they were in damage control mode after the public humiliation, I arranged for the ship's photography team to deliver something special to their cabin. A commemorative album we had created using the ship's photo service. Inside were professional photos taken throughout the cruise, candid shots of their arguments, their tense body language, their obvious discomfort, as David and I appeared in frame after frame. The photographers had been generously compensated to capture these moments discreetly. The album's title, engraved in elegant script: "When Truth Surfaced, a Journey of Discovery." We watched from the hallway as a steward delivered the package through the crack of their door. I glimpsed my husband's face when he opened it. The dawn of recognition, the descent into defeat. But the real culmination came the next morning, as the ship prepared to dock at our final port of call. David and I had arranged for a special announcement over the ship's PA system. "Attention passengers, Robert and Felicity, could you please report to the purser's office regarding an urgent matter with your disembarkation documents?" When they arrived, visibly anxious, they found not just the purser, but also a representative from the cruise line's corporate office who happened to be aboard, another fortunate connection we had made. "Mr. Robert, Ms. Felicity," the representative began formally, "it has come to our attention that you may have used fraudulent information when booking this cruise." My husband frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Your booking indicates this trip was reserved through your company as a business expense, with tax documentation filed accordingly. However, the nature of your stay appears to be personal rather than professional." Felicity paled. We didn't..." Furthermore, the representative continued, there's the matter of using company credit cards for non-business expenses, which has been flagged by your company's compliance department. David and I watched from a discreet distance as my husband's professional world began collapsing in real time. The evidence we had gathered, including email exchanges I had forwarded to his company's ethics hotline, had triggered an internal investigation. Meanwhile, Felicity received her own devastating news. Her access to their startup's financial accounts had been frozen pending an audit directed by investors. David had moved quickly, and her financial manipulations were now under scrutiny. As they stood there, their carefully constructed parallel lives disintegrating around them, I felt a strange elation. Not happiness. Not exactly vindication, but a deep sense of justice. This isn't just about the betrayal, I said quietly to David as we watched from afar. It's about the calculation, the premeditation, the years of lies. He nodded. They thought they were too smart to get caught, too arrogant to face consequences. Do you regret anything? I asked, suddenly curious about his feelings now that our plan was nearing its end. David considered this for a moment. I regret trusting someone who didn't deserve it. I regret not seeing the signs earlier. But this, he gestured toward the scene unfolding. This I don't regret at all. When my husband and Felicity emerged from the purser's office, their faces ashen with the understanding that their actions had real-world consequences beyond their romantic entanglement, I stepped into their path. Enjoy the cruise? I asked, my voice steady and clear. My husband looked at me with new eyes, not anger or defiance, but something like fear. Fear of what else I might know, what else I might have done. This is just the beginning, I told him quietly. When we dock tomorrow, you'll find your belongings packed and waiting at a hotel. The locks have been changed. Divorce papers are with my lawyer, and every member of our family and social circle has received a detailed account of how and why our marriage ended. I turned to Felicity. As for you, I wonder if your wedding vendors will refund your deposits. David tells me he's been quite thorough in his communications with them. She flinched as if I had slapped her. The thing about betrayal, I continued, addressing both of them, is that it shows who people really are. You both showed me exactly who you are. I'm just making sure everyone else sees it too. With that, David and I walked away, leaving them standing in shock in our wake. That night, our final night on the ship, we dined at the captain's table. The reservation originally made for my husband and Felicity, now transferred to us through the connections we had cultivated. 2 new beginnings, David proposed, raising his glass. I clinked mine against his, feeling lighter than I had in years. And to truth, no matter how painful, always setting you free. 6 months after that fateful cruise, I stood on a different deck. This one belonging to my new waterfront condo. The ocean stretched before me, infinite and uncertain, like my future. But for the first time in a long while, that uncertainty felt exhilarating rather than terrifying. The divorce had been finalised with surprising speed. My husband, faced with the mountain of evidence I had gathered and the professional embarrassment already unfolding, hadn't contested any of my terms. His affair had cost him more than just his marriage. The ethics investigation at his company had resulted in a demotion and professional censure. The cruise line had also banned him from future bookings after determining he had indeed committed fraud with his business. Expense claims. As for Felicity, her story had unravelled even more dramatically. The financial irregularities David had uncovered were just the tip of the iceberg. Once investors began looking closely at their startup's books, they found a pattern of embezzlement that led to criminal charges. Her wedding, needless to say, never materialised, though the cancelled vendor contracts and non-refundable deposits had created a financial burden that compounded her legal troubles. I sipped my morning coffee, watching seagulls wheel against the clear blue sky. My phone chimed with a text from David. Just landed, still on for lunch. Our relationship had evolved in unexpected ways since the cruise. Not romantically, we were both too scarred for that leap, but into something equally valuable. A genuine friendship forged in the crucible of shared betrayal and recovery. We had stayed in contact through the aftermath, supporting each other through divorce proceedings, legal complications, and the emotional turbulence of rebuilding our lives. He had relocated to open a new office of his now thriving company in my coastal city, a business decision that had coincided with my own relocation after the divorce. See you at the Pier restaurant at 1, I texted back as I prepared for our lunch. I reflected on how differently things had turned out from what either of us had expected when we boarded that cruise 6 months earlier, consumed with anger and betrayal. Neither of us had imagined emerging stronger or finding a genuine connection with each other. The Pier restaurant was busy when I arrived, but David had secured our usual table on the patio. He stood when he saw me, his smile genuine. "The Tokyo deal closed," he announced as I sat down. "The investors are thrilled." "Congratulations!" I raised my water glass in a mock toast. Not bad for someone whose fiancé tried to sink his company. He laughed, a sound that had become more frequent as the months passed. "Speaking of sinking, did you hear anything about our favourite couple?" I shook my head. "Not directly, but Clara mentioned seeing Robert at a conference last month. Apparently he's lost weight and looks haunted." Clara, my former neighbour, had stayed firmly in my corner during the divorce. "Felicity's plea agreement was finalised," David replied. "Probation, restitution, and community service. Her parents had to mortgage their house for her legal fees." We exchanged these updates not with malice, but with the detached interest of people who had moved beyond the need for revenge. Satisfaction had faded into something more valuable: indifference. Our meal arrived, and conversation shifted to our current lives. My new consulting business, his expansion plans, the charity gala we would both attend next weekend. "I've been meaning to ask," David said as we finished dessert. "That cruise line sent me a promotional email yesterday. Caribbean itinerary. Special offer for holiday travel." I raised an eyebrow. "Planning another revenge cruise so soon?" "Actually," he said, his expression turning serious, "I was thinking about reclaiming the experience. A trip with no agenda or manipulation, just enjoyment. Would you consider coming as friends?" He added quickly. "I think we both deserve to experience a cruise that isn't organised around someone else's betrayal." I considered his offer. This unexpected invitation to revisit the scene of our strange alliance. 6 months ago, I would have recoiled at the idea. Now I found myself nodding. "I'd like that," I said simply. As we walked along the waterfront after lunch, I realised something profound had shifted. The cruise that was meant to expose betrayal had inadvertently revealed something entirely different: my own resilience. I had survived not just my husband's infidelity, but the collapse of a future I had believed in completely. "You know what?" I said as we paused to watch sailboats in the harbour. "Sometimes I almost want to thank them." David looked surprised. "Thank them for what?" "For forcing me to become someone I'm here, for inadvertently introducing me to a true friend." I gestured between us. Their betrayal was painful, but what came after? I wouldn't change it for anything. He nodded slowly. "I've had the same thought. If Felicity hadn't cheated, I'd be married to someone who was willing to steal from our company and lie to my face daily. Instead, I'm here rebuilding something authentic." The sun gleamed on the water, casting everything in golden light. In that moment, I realised the most unexpected outcome of all. True closure doesn't come from revenge, however satisfying it might be. It comes from building something new from the wreckage, something honest and real. "So," David said, checking his watch, "I should head back for my conference call. But about that cruise, winter vacation, New Year's itinerary." I smiled, feeling a lightness that had once seemed impossible. New Year sounds perfect. An appropriate way to start the next chapter. As we said goodbye, I took one last look at the ocean. The same ocean we had sailed during that fateful cruise. The water that had carried us through betrayal now stretched before me as a symbol of possibility. The horizon was open, the future unwritten, and for the first time in years, I was genuinely excited to see what came next. That wraps up today's story. Talk about getting even. I love how they handled that situation with such precision. Let me know in the comments what you thought about David and the narrator becoming friends. Stick around for more stories with the usual Minecraft vibes in the background. I'll see you in the next one.